Thanks so much for visiting the Wake College and Young Adults Ministry page. We're so glad you stopped by. We hope you enjoy this message and pray that God speaks to you specifically through this teaching. If you'd like more information about who we are, follow us on our social media at Wake ABQ. Better yet, join us for a service on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. at Copper Point Church. Thanks again for tuning in. We hope you enjoy today's message from God's Word.
A contrast between true faith and false faith. That's the argument that's being made here. Not faith versus works, but true faith versus a false faith. And I got to be honest with you guys tonight, clarity is my priority tonight. Clarity is of utmost importance because if this has confused people for as long as it has, then I know that standing on this stage tonight, if I don't present this well, if I don't present this clear, then you're going to leave here confused. And so right off the bat, before we talk about anything else, I felt like I needed to make something abundantly clear to you because I'm going to be talking a lot about faith, but even more than that, I'm going to be talking a lot about deeds and about works. If you've ever heard me preach on this stage, we say something a lot here at Wake that we are saved by faith alone, period. We're not saved by works. It's not how many great things we can do, and that's what makes God love us more, and that's what gives us greater favor with God and gives us salvation. We are saved by faith, period, okay? And so I want you guys to repeat something after me real quick with some force like you mean it, okay? Real quick. So repeat this after me. Everybody say, I am saved by faith, not by works. And if you're taking notes, I want you to write that in like all caps somewhere at the top of your notes because that is the understanding, the bottom line, and the framework that we are working from all night long. As I'm talking about deeds, as I'm talking about works, keep that at the forefront. When it comes to salvation, it is not by works. It is by faith. And so when I'm reading James chapter 2, what I see is that James is showing us, I believe, three kinds of faith. Okay, there's three kinds of faith that he's looking at. And the first two deal with that false faith that I was just talking about. And then the last portion of this, the last type of faith that he has is what's dealing with true faith. And so I got 3 points tonight. The first two are going to deal with false faith. The last point is going to deal with true faith. And so we got a lot to cover tonight, guys. I read 13 verses. And so we're going in. Look at somebody next to you and say, we're going in. We're going in. Okay, so we're going to learn tonight. We're going to hopefully have some revealed truth to us tonight. And I've been praying all day that God would just speak through me to you and with a lot of clarity. So what's the first thing that James is showing us here? The first type of faith, number one, is a faith that is dead. A faith that is dead, okay? James, going back to chapter 2, verses 14 through 17, he says, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? This is a rhetorical question that I hope that you can already answer. What good is it? It's no good at all. Like there's nothing good about a faith like that. Then he says in verse 17, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. And so James takes a moment to illustrate this for us, and he gives us this ridiculous illustration so that he can properly illustrate how ridiculous this type of dead faith really is. And so here's the picture that James paints. He goes, suppose one of you, now I want you to kind of imagine yourself in this scenario. He's talking to Christians. He says, suppose you're walking outside and you see somebody, and it's like middle of winter. They don't have the proper clothing. They're looking like they're freezing, and they look malnourished. They're asking you for food, and you walk up, and your response to them, what you say is, hey, God bless you, man, and hey, stay warm out here, and, eat some food a little later if you can, and, man, I'm praying for you. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray that you don't die tonight in this freezing cold. God bless you, and you walk away. And that's the illustration that James paints, that this is kind of what that looks like, this faith that is dead. Faith that is dead sees a problem but does nothing about it. Faith that is dead looks ridiculous, and so he paints this ridiculous picture. Now, my favorite picture of this actually comes from Charles Schulz, creator of the Peanuts comic, the cartoon, And a lot of people don't realize that Charles Schulz was actually a believer. And this was such a ridiculous concept that he used it as comedy. He said, this is ridiculous that somebody would do it. So look at this. You got Linus and Charlie Brown. Charlie's like, Snoopy looks kind of cold, doesn't he? And Linus is like, I'll say he does. Maybe we'd better go over and comfort him. And so they go over. Linus like, be of good cheer, Snoopy. Charlie's like, yes, be of good cheer. And they just bounce. They just walk away. Snoopy's like, what the heck, guys? Like, no jacket. Nobody's going to invite me in. And so even Charles Schulz added to a comic strip something that's supposed to be comical, because this type of dead faith is so ridiculous that it can end up in a comic strip. And so we need a faith that is alive. And so, this idea, though, was not unique to James. It definitely wasn't unique to Charles Schulz. Jesus, per usual, beat these guys to the punch. And so every time that I read James chapter 2, Matthew 25, like immediately pops into my head. And what we have going on in Matthew 25 is Jesus is telling this parable. And he's got all these people around. He launches into this parable. And it's kind of a pretty straightforward idea. He's saying that there's this king, and the picture that he's painting is that Jesus is this king. And this is a moment that hasn't even happened yet, 2,000 years later. This is a moment that is still coming when people stand before him on the day of judgment. And so this king, who is Jesus, he's standing there and he's dividing the goats from the sheep. Okay, now anytime in Scripture you see them dividing sheep and goats, we don't want to be a goat. Okay, so look at somebody you haven't looked at yet and say, don't be a goat. We don't want to be a goat. And so this king, he starts dividing up the sheep and the goat. He puts the sheep on his right. He puts the goats on his left. And then as we begin to look at this further, we see that these aren't actual sheep. These are people. Okay, so he's dividing them like sheep and goats, but these are people, and the sheep on his right are Christians, born-again believers, true disciples of Jesus. Now look at what it says in verse 34. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And so then as this story kind of unfolds, this parable, these people that Jesus put on his right-hand side, like they're confused. They're looking at Jesus like, okay, wait, hold on for a second. They're looking at this king, they're looking at Jesus, and they start asking the questions. They're like, when were you hungry and we fed you? Like, when were you in need of clothes, Jesus, and we gave you clothes? When were you in prison and we visited you? Like, we don't recall any of these things. Like, they were actually confused by what was being said to them. Now, look at Jesus' response. There's so much to this. In verse 40, it says, the king will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Whatever you did for people who are in need, whatever you did for people who were hurting and broken, and as you reached out to them, as you loved them, and as you served them, you did it for me. Some translations even go as far as to say, it has Jesus saying, you did it to me. You did it unto me. And so we begin to look at this, that these sheep, these deeds that they were doing for people, they were actually doing for and to Jesus. And then Jesus looks at the goats. He's like, all right, you goats over here on my left-hand side. And he begins to say the exact opposite things to them. He says that, I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me a drink. I was in prison and you didn't visit me. And then they ask the same question. They're confused as well. They're like, Jesus, when did we see you hungry and not give you a sandwich? Like, how many of you guys, if you saw Jesus on the side of the road, like, you're going to buy him a burger from Burger King at minimum, right? And they're like, if I would have known that homeless guy was you, Jesus, I would have done something about it. And isn't that kind of the point that he's getting at here? He's like, if I had known that was you, I would have done something. And Jesus, you start to look at this and you see that is the point. And he looks at these people and he says, truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you didn't do for me. And then in verse 46, he says, then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Now, these goats, these people on the left, they're going away to eternal separation from God, and the people on the right are going off into eternal life. And so here in point 1, what we're seeing is a faith that is dead. But I want to show you that Jesus takes this even further. And this isn't just that there's a dead faith. Hear me tonight. A faith that is dead leads to death. Jesus takes this further. James just said, man, that faith is dead. Jesus says if you have a dead faith, it's going to lead to eternal death. It's going to lead to separation from me for all of eternity. Now, if we're not careful reading James chapter 2 or Matthew 25, individually or even collectively together, there's a faulty conclusion that we can land on. And I see people land on this all the time. And if this is you, I'm going to call you out real quick, okay? So people end like this. Like, okay, so they read Matthew 25. They read James, who's like, you gotta be out there serving people. What kind of faith is that? It's no good. And so the conclusion that is drawn is, okay, so if I just start feeding people and clothing people and visiting people in prison, then it's like I'm doing it to Jesus, and then I'm gonna get into heaven. And so that's the conclusion that is drawn. And so we start thinking, well, all right, this Saturday, I'm waking up early. I'm going to Roadrunner Food Bank. I'm going out to maybe to some of the prisons. I'm going to try to visit people because, man, I want to do this for Jesus so that I can get into heaven. And that's where a lot of people get to. That's the conclusion that is drawn. But what you see here from James and Jesus is that these works are not the grounds for salvation, but rather they are the evidence of the faith required for entry into heaven. They are not the grounds for entry into heaven. They are evidence of the faith required for entry into heaven. You got to catch that tonight. We're going to unpack that even more as we go. Now, something else I want to draw to your attention is that the people on the right, they had no idea. I said this a moment ago. They had no idea that they were doing this for Jesus. No clue. They were shocked. Like, we did this for you? And I look at that and I think there's kind of a sense of beauty and purity to that. Would you agree? That I started thinking about that for a moment. These people, they did all of these amazing things. They were acting in love. They were serving people. They were helping those who were in need, comforting those who were desperate for comfort. And they were just doing it out of the overflow of their heart. They were doing it out of what was already inside of them, not because they felt like Jesus was watching them. And so there's a kind of a purity to that. And I just want to tell you tonight that we don't leave here beginning to think that, okay, now I'm just going to go start serving people. I'm just going to go start doing good deeds and good works because Jesus is watching, and it's like I'm doing it to Jesus, and that's how I'm going to get into heaven. That takes that pure nature out of what we're doing here. What we've got to get to is this point where we say, you know what? I love God, and I have received the love of God. I have received his comfort and his mercy and his forgiveness, and God loves people. So guess what? I'm going to love people, and I'm going to give mercy, and I'm going to extend grace, and I'm going to extend forgiveness, and I'm going to serve people as best as I can from a pure heart, from the overflow, from what you've received. Now, something obvious to point out, you might already be thinking this, is that you can do these kinds of deeds and not do them in the name of faith. You don't have to be a Christian to do good deeds and to do these kinds of good works. There's a lot of secular humanitarian efforts around the world. And I know that. And so here's what, and I think James knows that too. And here's what James is trying to make abundantly clear to us. The presence of these deeds cannot be used to argue the presence of faith, but the absence of these deeds may be used to argue the absence of faith. I'm going to have them leave that up there for a moment if you want to write that down, but I think we have to make that distinction clear because there are people all over the world that do a lot of great things. And so just because you do great things does not mean that there is the presence of faith. But again, the absence of these deeds may be used to argue the absence of a faith. It reveals a dead faith. Now let's get philosophical for a moment. Is that okay? Anybody love philosophy? I love philosophy because nobody's ever right. Okay, so not deeply philosophical, but think with me for a moment. If you've got an apple tree and it's out in your yard and you think it's an apple tree, you're telling everybody it's an apple tree, and that's the apple tree. If that apple tree never once produces an apple, it never even produces like the budding of an apple, can that really, truly still be called an apple tree? Now, we can argue that back and forth probably all day long. Again, we're never going to be right because that's philosophy for you. But I take that same argumentation with the Christian for a moment. Stick with me for a moment. If somebody looks like a Christian at times, if somebody says they're a Christian, if maybe you say that person is a Christian, but at no point in their life do they ever produce the fruit of Christ. You see, the word Christian literally means Christ-like. And so if no Christ-like fruit is ever produced out of their life, can you really say that that person is a Christian? My thoughts on the matter? No. I wouldn't say that person is a Christian because we know through what Jesus said in John 15:5, Jesus said, I am the vine, you, talking about all of us, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And so we begin to realize tonight that if we are attached to the vine, we will bear fruit. And so again, if you are not bearing fruit, that can be used as possible evidence that maybe there is an absence of true faith in your life. Maybe you are not attached to the vine. So number one, faith that is dead. Number two tonight, faith that is deceived. Faith that is deceived. Write that down if you would. Verses 18 and 19. James says, but someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. And you see, they're trying to make that distinction. We already said earlier, you can't make that distinction. They're trying to do it. And James is going to try to shut them down. He says, show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. I want to look at verse 19 specifically. You believe that there is one God. Good. So I like this. I feel like James is giving me a compliment. He's like, you believe in God? Man, good job. And then you realize real quick, it's a backhanded compliment. He's like, but even the demons believe that and shudder. Like it freaks them out. But even the demons believe in God. Now, I was reading recently, it was a Gallup poll that was taken just several years ago, and still in America, this may blow your mind, still in America, anywhere from 85 to close to 89% of people still believe in God. Maybe not necessarily the God of the Bible, but some kind of higher power, and a vast majority of that percentage believe in the God of the Bible. Then I kept reading, and it's still around 75 to 80% of Americans believe that Jesus is the Son of God. That's almost 80% of Americans. Now, I read something like that, and I start looking at our nation. I start looking at the state of the United States of America, and I'll be honest, the conclusion that I come to is that I don't think that 80% of our nation are born-again Christians, true, genuine disciples and followers of Jesus. Would any of you raise a hand and say that you agree with me on that? That it doesn't look like 80% of our country are like sold out for Jesus, because do you guys realize if 80% of Americans follow Jesus, this place would look a lot different. And honestly, the entire world would look a lot different, because so America goes, so the rest of the world goes. And so, man, I look at that, I'm like, okay, something is off here. 80% of people say they believe in Jesus as the Son of God, but that you look at our society and you realize that really quickly, that belief alone doesn't do very much, doesn't take you very far. And I would even argue that belief alone doesn't take you anywhere. Let me ask you another question. What percentage of the demons believe in God? 100%. Every one of them believe in God. How's that working out for the demons? And so what James does here is like, he throws this thing like out of left field. I mean, he's like talking to us, like, you believe in God, good job. And then you realize he's being sarcastic. He caught me off guard. And he's like, but check this out. Even demons believe in God. He just drops that bomb. Like, I feel like James is trying to rattle his readers in this moment. He's desperately, and kind of what I'm trying to do right now, as best as I can, as much as my voice will allow me tonight, I am desperate for you to know tonight that your belief in Jesus alone does not take you anywhere. It's got to extend beyond belief in Jesus into a true faith, into a greater faith. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that miss salvation and miss eternity by about 12 inches. What I mean by that is the distance from their head to their heart. Because there are so many people that believe in God. We believe in Jesus up here, but we never let it sink into our heart and transform our life. The demons believe, well, what makes us different from the demons? Well, we can make a decision to submit our will and our heart and our life to that God that we believe in. And once we do that, man, our life is radically transformed. And once you have a transformed life, the fruit and what you begin to produce completely changes. And so that's ultimately how we get to the point of producing fruit. You see, there are so many people who are deceived into thinking that belief is enough. And the question I want to ask you tonight is that you? Are you one of those people who's been thinking for a few weeks, who's been thinking for years, for months, that your belief in God, your belief in Jesus is enough? And tonight, I don't want to try to freak you out. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not even trying to call you out. I'm just trying to set this in front of you as a caution and tell you that belief alone is not enough. It has got to move into a faith that radically changes you. You want to know if you're somebody who only believes, you produce no fruit. What does the rest of your week look like? What is this gospel done in your life? What is the transformation that has taken place in your life? Do you have any fruit? And if not, then you might be somebody that has a dead faith, or you might be deceived in your faith. And so James, he continues on. He says, there's a faith that is dead. He says there's a faith that is deceived. And the third thing that I want to look at tonight is a faith that is dynamic. Everybody say dynamic. A faith that is dynamic. Now, this word, not in the Greek, just according to dictionary.com, dynamic means pertaining to or characterized by energy or effective action, vigorously active or forceful, energetic. And I love that. I'm thinking like a dynamic faith. You see, all wrapped up in that is energy. It's movement. It's not just action, but it's effective action. It's force. You know, not a faith that's going to force itself onto people, but a faith that is a force to be reckoned with. Like, man, I love this idea of a dynamic faith, and that's my heart, and that's my prayer for you, that you would have it. Now I want to look at verses 20 through 26, and we're going to kind of break these down individually and wrap things up tonight. But in verse 20, he continues on, James, and he says, "You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless?" And again, James is asking one of those questions that, like, he doesn't care what your response is. He's going to tell you anyway. So James is like, do you want evidence? And then he just launches out, and he launches into these stories about Abraham and Rahab. Now, the Abraham one I understand. You know, like I've read about Abraham all through Genesis, and like so much of the Bible is about him. Rahab is a little bit more of an obscure character. Now, you look at Abraham for a moment. Abraham is like, he's called a friend of God. Abraham is the father of Israel. He's also called the father of faith in the Bible. Like, it makes sense. Guys, there's a song about Abraham. Like, did any of you guys grow up? Do any of you guys know the Father Abraham song? Like, you grew up in church? If you know this, I'm not really going to sing it, but I'm gonna do a little bit of it. I need you to do it with me, okay? So if you know this, you got to do the Atlanta Braves and Florida State Seminoles Tomahawk Chop for some reason. I don't know why. That's part of it, okay? So, all right, here we go. You guys ready for this? Father Abraham. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. Then he's like, I'm one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord, okay? You're a little kid like, yes, let's praise the Lord. Father Abraham. And then we got Hagar. No, not Hagar. I keep wanting to say Hagar. We got Rahab. 2 completely different women in the Bible. Then you got Rahab. And Rahab, I'm like, okay, you're not like the mother of faith. You're in a much different position than Abraham. Like, you're not really in the same, like, area of him. I mean, she does this amazing act of faith, but it seemed like an interesting go-to with her. Rahab is a prostitute living in Jericho. She's not even like one of the Hebrew people. And so we look at Rahab. Guys, Rahab, the prostitute, she doesn't have her own song. I didn't grow up at kids' church singing about Rahab, the prostitute. I wasn't like, Rahab, the prostitute, had many sons, and many sons. That works better than I wanted it to, but I didn't grow up singing about Rahab. But what's so cool, I love that James, excuse me, I'm getting flustered up here. I love that James uses Rahab as an example. In her story, I'm not going to go too much into hers because I got to save time. I'm going to dive into Abraham's story. But Rahab's story is in Joshua chapter 2. If you want to jot that down, I'd love for you to read about Rahab. And basically what we identify from Rahab is that just like Abraham, just like we're about to read through him, she acted in faith, and she didn't have a faith that was just belief. She had a faith that led her to do, to act. She acted on her faith, and she was considered righteous as a result. And so verse 21, so we jump back into Abraham's story for a moment. He said, was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? And now I know I can't just blow through that because I understand that there would be people in here that don't maybe know what that means. I offered Isaac on the altar. And so let me give a really quick flyby of this story. So Abraham is old, okay? Not like 35 or 40, like to us that's old. He's like 75 years old. And God comes to him and says, you're going to be the father of all of these nations. And he basically says, your wife is going to get pregnant. And she'd been barren her whole life. She's pretty much the same age. And so not only is this promise unbelievable, it's a little bit gross. Okay, let's just be real for a moment. 75 years old. Okay, so gets this promise. And then it's 24 years later before this promise actually comes to pass. And Sarah gets pregnant. And it's like, it shocks her so bad, the Bible says she just breaks out laughing. Like, it's a coping mechanism. When you're 99 and you get pregnant, you just have to laugh it off, okay? And so she just starts laughing. And then, 9 months later, they have a little baby boy. They name him Isaac. And that means, like, son of laughter. This is funny. So we're just going to name you funny. Okay, so they have Isaac. And then just a few years later, I always picture him as maybe a 7, 8, 9-year-old boy, something like that. God speaks to Abraham and goes, Abraham, I need you to take Isaac up to the top of this mountain, and I need you to sacrifice him. Abraham's looking at Isaac and looking at God like, what? I waited 99 years. You want me to sacrifice? And it wasn't just sacrificing Isaac. It was sacrificing this promise. And Abraham, though, as crazy as he is, he never had any reason to not trust God. And so he went. He goes up this mountain, and he has faith the whole time he's climbing. Because Isaac's like, Dad, where's the sacrifice? Like, he's kind of picking up on something's wrong here, And Abraham keeps saying, God's going to provide. God's going to provide. And he's tying up Isaac's hands and feet like, God's going to provide. I think he is. And puts him on the altar, pulls out the knife like, God's going to provide. And he just covers his eyes. And he begins to bring down that knife with enough force to have killed his son. And finally, at the last moment, an angel cries out and goes, Abraham. I always imagine this angel got there a little bit too late. Like, he was out of breath. Like, Abraham, oh my gosh. Like, we did not think you were going to actually go through with this, bro. Like, stop it. And so it's just funny. He gets to the last second. I'm like, this guy, exactly. So he comes in, stops him. He's like, there's a ram over here. Let's sacrifice the ram. That's a good idea. They sacrifice the ram. And so you begin to look at this story, and that's what, in verse 21, that's what he's saying. Abraham was considered righteous for what he did. He believed God, but he actually acted on that belief. And then in verse 22, he says, you see that his faith and his actions were working together, okay? They go together, peanut butter and jelly. They're working in tandem. And his faith was made complete. Everybody say complete. By what he did. Isn't that an interesting thought right there? That his faith was made complete. Like, I thought about that for a long time this week. Like, what does that even mean? His faith was made complete by what he did. Now, I want you to think with me for a moment. Let's just use some imagination, okay? Now, imagine I was having a conversation with somebody about this chair. And this person, they're standing over here, they're talking to me like, Brandon, this is a nice looking chair, man. Like, That's a nice looking chair. Like, I believe in this chair. And actually, I believe in this chair so much that I believe that this chair could hold me up if I sat in it. And like, okay, this is a weird conversation, but wow, you really have a lot of belief in that chair. You really think it can hold you up. Why don't you go ahead and take a seat? Well, I don't really want to take a seat in the chair. I don't need to take a seat. Like, I believe the chair can hold me up. I don't need to take a seat in the chair. And I'm like, you believe the chair will hold you up, just take a seat in the chair. Like, you're going to get tired eventually. You're going to have to sit down. Why don't you just take a seat? Well, I don't know, man. Like, I have some things with chairs in my past. Like, I don't know if I really want to sit down. Maybe we could just stand up and have this conversation. And I'm looking at him like, you just told me you believe this chair can hold you up. Now, in order to make that belief complete, in order to complete that faith, in order for me not to doubt that you actually have faith, you're going to have to take a seat eventually. And what I love about this story of Abraham is God tells Abraham, go and sacrifice your son. Go and sacrifice the promise, everything you've been waiting for your entire life. And Abraham, he believed God. But you know how we know he believed God? He took a seat. He walked up the mountain, he tied up his kid, and he began to bring the knife down on his own son, his only son. Abraham took a seat. He didn't just look at God and go, man, God looks nice. I believe in God. I trust God. I believe that God has a plan. No, he said, I believe God has a plan, and I'm gonna lean on that plan. And I believe in it enough that I will put the weight of my life, I will put all of my faith and trust on that belief and trust in God. I'll put my faith on it. Abraham took a seat. And, there's some people that believe, though, that, like, they're better off for not taking a seat. Like, well, no, if I take a seat, then it's going to, like, nullify faith. Man, I have faith. I don't need to take a seat. And what James is arguing is that, yes, I know that you believe, and that's great, but make that belief complete by being willing to sit on that belief. Put your weight on what you're saying that your faith is in. And guys, there's going to be a lot of times in our life where we have to take a seat. There's going to be times where God's calling you to move. God's calling you to a different major. God's calling you to get into or out of a relationship. Maybe God's calling you to not move and stay in Albuquerque. Whatever it might be, but there's going to be so many times in our life where we say, God, where we're saying things like, I trust God. We come in here to Wake and we sing songs about how we believe in God, that God is good, that his plan is better than ours. Well, guess what? If that's what you're saying that you believe, eventually you're going to have to take a seat. And that's what completes our faith and proves that we actually did have the belief that we said that we had. Take a seat. Look at somebody next to you real quick and say, take a seat. Look at them again and say, I'm already sitting down. That's a weird thing to tell me. Okay, let's move on. Verse 23. And the scripture was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. He's quoting Genesis 15 here. And he said it was credited to him as righteousness because he believed God, and he was called God's friend. Look at verse 24 is the kicker. This is what a lot of people have issue with right here. He says, you see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. You're like, Brandon, that does not sound like what you said earlier. Okay, like I'm calling out James right now. Well, again, this is where a lot of people get to, and I'm gonna bring some clarity to this. But James quotes Genesis 15, and as I read that, I remembered Paul in Romans chapter 4. He actually quoted the exact same verse from Genesis 15. And these guys are talking about faith, and I'm like, we need to pair these together and see what's going on. And so as you read James 2, and you read Romans 3 and Romans 4, I'll be honest, it appears, maybe at a first read and maybe at a 30th read, that these guys are drawing completely different conclusions. And so let's look at what Paul writes. Romans chapter 3, verses 27 through 28. He says, where then is boasting? Is it excluded? It is excluded. Because of what? Because of what law? The law that requires works? No, because of the law that requires faith. Look at verse 28. For we maintain that a person is justified by faith apart from the works of the law. Okay, so we're seeing some issues here. Maybe, again, at a first read, we're like, these sound like they're in completely different ballparks. Then Romans 4, verses 1 through 3, he says, "What then shall we say about Abraham? Or that Abraham, our forefather, according to the flesh, discovered in this matter. If in fact," now Paul's not saying like, okay, if Abraham, he's kind of almost mocking this idea. He's like, if in fact Abraham was justified by works, he had something to boast about, but not before God. What does the scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Now, as you read these back to back, it might seem that James and Paul are at odds here. But I want to tell you tonight that through further looking at this, through careful study, you actually see that they're writing from two completely different starting points. And so what you look at here is Paul, when he talks about works, Paul is talking about the Jewish law. He's talking about the 500 laws that come from the Mosaic law that all through the Old Testament we read stories about. All through the New Testament we get new theology and new doctrine regarding this law, and we understand that, yes, it was good, but it was never able to save. People could never live up to the law, and because they couldn't live up to it, they became subject to all of it. Then enter Christ. That's why we needed Jesus. The Bible says that he fulfilled all of the law, and now through him, through his righteousness, we gain that same righteousness. And so here's the thing though. So Paul's talking about the works of the law. Now when James talks about works, James is talking about the law of Christ. Do you know what the law of Christ is? When Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love God and love people. And so when James is talking about works, guys, he's saying that our works are not these Old Testament laws that we need to live up to for salvation. He's saying our works, once we've received salvation, they come from this idea of loving God, and wrapped up in loving God is trusting God and obeying God and loving and serving people as best as we possibly can. So they're talking about two completely different things. Paul, he's addressing the root of salvation, while James is addressing the fruit of salvation. Paul's saying, hey, Paul's talking about saving faith. If you want to be saved, then it's by faith and faith alone through grace. And not by these works, not by this law. Guys, we've got to get rid of trying to achieve salvation through appeasing God through what we do. And James, addressing the fruit of salvation, he says, deeds are the results after we've been saved. Deeds are what come out after. And it says at no point is, and I believe at no point is James saying that these deeds are necessary for salvation. At no point is James saying that. And he's actually in full agreement with Paul. So the last thing here is Paul saying Abraham was justified because he believed God. And James is saying, exactly, Paul. And we know he believed God because he took a seat. And so he's justified by, follow this for a moment. He said he was justified by what he did because what Abraham did proved that he actually believed what God was asking him to do. It proved his faith. It completed his faith. And if the band and keys want to come back up tonight, verse 24, I want to readdress it for a moment. He said, you see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. But we know that we are saved by faith alone. Actually, what's crazy here is the better translation is not faith alone, but actually faith that is alone, or a lonely faith. So let me read it with that context. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by a faith that is alone. Guys, we are saved by faith alone. Martin Luther is the one who quoted this, I believe, the best out of anybody. And he said, I believe coming out of James, he said, people are justified by faith alone, but not by a faith that is alone. I love that. Man, it is grace through faith that we are saved. But man, that justification, when you're looking at your faith, is it a lonely faith or is it paired with these works that are absolutely necessary, that are absolutely the fruit of a transformed life? I'll say this again. Evidence of these deeds is not necessarily proof of true faith, but the absence of them may be proof of the absence of true faith. do you have these kinds of deeds? Do you have these kinds of works? And by works, again, not works of the law, not works of the Old Testament law, but works of the law of Christ, loving God and loving people. Billy Graham, he once said that in the Christian life, faith and works go together like inhaling and exhaling. Faith is taking the gospel in, works is taking the gospel out. It's like inhaling and exhaling, things that go together, our faith and our deeds. And so, guys, if our faith has no works, then spiritually speaking, we're not breathing. And it's a dead faith. And I want so desperately for every single person in here, I want you to be breathing. I want you to be producing fruit in your life. And so I want to tell you this tonight, as I wrap up right here. If you are producing fruit, then I want to encourage you. If you're looking at all this and you're like, okay, I'm producing fruit. I'm living according to the law of Christ as best as I possibly can. Then I want to encourage you to keep going. Keep moving as fast as you can, but don't leave here tonight and think for a second that you're going to go do more works, that you're just going to add to these good deeds. Go fall more in love with Jesus. Get closer to Jesus, and the works will come as a result. They will be a byproduct of being closer to Jesus. And if you're not producing, if you're in here taking notes, or you're in here sitting down thinking, yeah, I think this is for me tonight, because I've been saying I'm a Christian, but it's become evident to me tonight that I have a dead faith or I have a deceived faith. My faith is definitely not a dynamic faith. If that's you, I don't want you to keep going. I want you to stop where you are. And just like I told the people who are producing, don't leave here tonight thinking, I'm gonna go produce more. I'm gonna go do more works. Maybe if I do the right things, it'll be like it's happening to Jesus, and that's how I can fix all of this. Again, that's not how this works. What I need you to do tonight is I need you to meet Jesus. I need you to get maybe reconnected to the vine, or maybe connected for the first time back to the vine. And when you are connected to the vine that is Jesus Christ, you will bear much fruit. Man, we got to be people that bear fruit. Is the fruit missing in your life? And if it is, I don't want you thinking about this outward expression that's missing and start thinking, okay, well, what do I need to fix out here? If the fruit is missing, the fix to that is in here, not out here, in here. So if you'd bow your head and close your eyes tonight, I'm gonna give just one response. If you're in here tonight, I'm not gonna call you forward. I just want to pray for you, and then we're gonna pray for everybody, and we're gonna dismiss tonight. But if you're in here and you're saying, Brandon, tonight I need to get connected to the vine. I've got to get connected to Jesus because I am not producing and I am not bearing much fruit like I should be. And it's become evident tonight. And you might be in here saying, I need to be reconnected to the vine. And maybe you've been around church for years. But tonight is your night to get reconnected and to stay connected to Jesus. Or again, if that's you for the first time, and if that's you for the first time, what you're going to experience tonight is not just connection to the vine, but you're going to experience forgiveness of your sins. You're going to receive mercy. You're going to receive grace. You're going to inherit the promise of eternal life with Jesus. That's what you're going for tonight. Your past is gone. You get to walk into your new life tonight. And if that's you, again, every head bowed, every eye closed, I want to get reconnected, or I want to get connected to the vine tonight. Would you lift up your hand? Maybe 5 seconds. Just keep it up. I want you to be bold about it. Nothing to be ashamed of. I need to connect to the vine tonight. All right, you guys can put your hands down. Tonight is your night. Do not walk out of these doors without having had a moment and an encounter with Jesus. And in that encounter with Jesus, in receiving his love, that is how we love. That is how works and deeds are produced. It is the only way. Let's pray tonight. Heavenly Father, God, I'm so grateful for every person that's here. Thank you for speaking to our minds. Thank you for speaking to our hearts. And God, tonight, we just want to receive more of your love. God, we just want to be connected to you through Christ so that we can bear fruit, so we can produce. God, we need to produce for our own sake, but God, there's a world around us that needs Christians to be producing the fruit of Jesus Christ. So tonight we declare in our hearts, we declare even with our mouths, God, that we're going to connect. We're going to stay connected to the vine. And as we do so, we will bear the fruit of Christ. And God, I just pray against any lack of clarity tonight. I pray that nobody would leave here thinking that they're going to try harder, they're going to do more. Help us to rest, God, in who you are and what you've already done. And through that, we will produce. God, we love you. We're grateful for what you're doing in this ministry. Thank you for every person that walked in these doors tonight and those who will walk in the future. We love you. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Everybody said, amen.